This week on the show, we look at an OpenBSD setup on a new laptop, revel in BSDCan trip reports, and visit daemons and friendly ninjas. So something for everyone in this week's show of BSD Now. BSD Now, episode 202, Brokering Bind, recorded on the 12th of July, 2017. Hi, I'm your host, Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're back from our hackathon weekend, where we spent a little time with other BSD folks, mostly FreeBSD, and we had a great time. We drove there. Yeah, was awesome. And we're right back for you to get your weekly dose of BSD Now. So we should get right into our headlines this week, which the first one is OpenBSD and the Modern Laptop by our PF writer and puffiest, Peter Hanstein.
So Peter's written this blog post, and he says, do you think that OpenBSD is suitable only for firewalls and high security servers? Think again. And he goes through the steps to transform his modern mid to high range laptop into a useful Unix workstation using OpenBSD. Says, one thing that never ceases to amaze me is that whenever I'm out and about with my primary laptop at conferences or elsewhere where geeks gather, a significant subset of people I meet have a hard time believing that my laptop runs OpenBSD and it's the only operating system installed on the machine. And then it takes a bit of demonstrating that, yes, the graphics run at the best available resolution the hardware can offer, the wireless network is functional, suspend and resume works, and so forth. And of course, yes, I do use the system for writing books and articles too. Apparently, heavy users of some other operating systems do not always run that operating system on their primary workstation. So he goes on to describe what his old laptop was like and what the new one is.
Mm-hmm. So he pretty much describes all his old laptops, or the laptops he had over the years. They also ran OpenBSD, so that was pretty much no big change for him. But he wanted to...
Looks like in 2006 he had a ThinkPad R60, and then in 2014 he got a ThinkPad SL500, but it started falling to pieces. So he bought from a local Norwegian company the Multicom Ultrabook W840. And that was all fine until apparently during his BSDCan trek, he managed to crack the screen. And so he went back to that same supplier to get a new one.
Mm-hmm.
So his old that 2014 machine was a 14-inch model that was 20 millimeters thick and weighed about 2 kilograms, had 16 gigs of RAM, a 240 gig SSD, and a 1 terabyte hard drive, which he put his /home directory on, although over the years he swapped that out with a 1 terabyte SSD. Fast forward to this year, and the screen has shrunk slightly to 13.3 inches, but it's only 18 millimeters thick, and actually weighs 1.5 kilograms, so he shaved half a kilogram off. It's got 32 gigs of RAM, a 512 gig SSD, and a 2 terabyte hard drive for the home directory. He links to the stats. It's in Norwegian, but all the specs and so on are readable in English. And he's got a fancy picture of the box and the two machines side by side. And he walks through how he did the install and got his system up and working.
Yep, that's a very detailed section in the blog post. We won't cover this here, but people can pretty much follow it through the OpenBSD installer and can set up their system the way he does it, with Wi-Fi, creating users and providing a root password for the root account, of course, and starting SSHD, the usual stuff you would normally do. And you also set up the X11 working environment, so the Xeno DM Display Manager and XFCE in his case, so which has worked for him quite a while, and that's what he wanted to replicate. So he wanted to have his old working environment the way he has been used to on the old machine should be also available on the new machine, of course. And he closes pretty much with the with the statement that if you have any questions on running OpenBSD as a primary working environment, that he's generally happy to answer. But in almost all cases, he would prefer that you use the mailing list, such as misc@openbsd.org, because then you can have the general discussions from other people that are having similar OpenBSD machines and can provide tips there. And there's also a Facebook group, on the OpenBSD Facebook group. We have that linked in the show notes. And there you can also post your questions and hopefully get answers for your problems you might have. And there's also...
It's just strange in my mind to hear OpenBSD Facebook group.
You can judge. I mean, yeah, it sounds eerily unfamiliar, but it's... Yeah, if people are interested in that, they... can look at that and maybe find some like-minded folks. And he also has linked a couple of slides for his recent OpenBSD NDU talk, which I haven't looked at, but surely interesting to look at, because everything, or pretty much everything that Peter Hanstein puts out in writing is well worth reading. And he has a user group talk in there, apparently, which might be beneficial if you're not familiar yet with OpenBSD in general. So it's a general introduction into the whole mindset of what OpenBSD is and does. And of course, comments can also be left on the article on his blog itself. So there's going to be a couple of posts there and hopefully a vibrant discussion about pros and cons about different laptops and OpenBSD working on them. I like the OpenBSD laptops because they have relatively good support for suspend and resume, or got better testing.
Well, my laptop suspends and resumes on FreeBSD, but I know newer models have issues sometimes. It's all down to graphics drivers and Wi-Fi mostly.
Yeah.
So, moving on. Our next story is from the FreeBSD Foundation. They have a trip report. So the FreeBSD Foundation sponsored Roller Engel to come from Colorado to BSDCan for the first time. And as part of being sponsored to go to the conference, you have to write a trip report. And they wrote a very nice detailed one. We obviously can't read the whole thing because it would take a very long time. But we can clip through a couple of the high points to get you interested and also to cover the parts I feel are most important. So they say that after they dropped off their luggage, they headed straight to the Goat Boff, which took place at the Royal Oak Pub. So there were a number of people that were engaged in conversations with food and drink. I sat down at a table and was delighted that the people sitting with me were also into the BSDs and were happy to talk about it the whole time. I felt right at home from the start, as people were very nice to me and were interested in what I was working on. I honestly didn't know that I would fit in this well. I had a preconceived notion that people may be hard to approach as they're all famous and so technically advanced. At first, people seemed to only be working in small circles. Once you get more familiar with the faces, you realize that these circles don't always contain the same people, and that they're just the people talking about a specific topic. I found that it was easy to participate in the conversation, and also found that people are happy to get your feedback on a subject as well. Goes on to say, I was actually surprised how easy it was to get along with everyone and how included I felt in the activities. They also mentioned that they volunteered to help wherever possible, and they got to work with the video crew that recorded the audio and slides for the talks. The people at BSDCan were incredibly easy to talk to and actually interested in what you're doing with BSD and how they can help you do it. It's nice to feel welcome in the community. It's kind of like going home. Dan, the conference organizer, mentioned that in his welcome session for the first day of BSDCan, that to many people, the conference is like home, and coming back and seeing all your old friends and so on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the trip report is very detailed and chronicles the 2 days of the FreeBSD Developer Summit and the 2 days of the conference that were attended there. So there's lots of detail on what happened and so on. A couple of excerpts from the beginning of the Dev Summit. They say, there was some discussion about the new Code of Conduct by Benno Rice, who mentioned that people are welcome to join the body that works on that. Next, Alan introduced the idea of creating a process to formally discuss big project changes and so on, and becoming the FCP, or FreeBSD Community Proposal. Roller, who's writing the trip report here, works on Python as well, and he says, in Python, we have the Python enhancement process, or PEP, and it's very similar. There's Benno and I based the FCP process partially on the Python process. He says, I thought this idea is a great step for FreeBSD to implement, as well as a great thing that Python already has. He says he also talks a little bit about our core's discussion about how non-code contributions could be recognized with the project member status and so on. And he says the junior jobs item that was brought up on the wiki were also a great place to look for places to get started to getting involved with FreeBSD, smaller tasks you can start with rather than necessarily building something new from scratch. So that was interesting. And it turns out he ended up wasting no time at all, and during the Hackers Lounge started working with Pierre Ponchery from EdgeBSD and contributing to that website and working on a bunch of stuff there.
Hey, great.
Then he goes into the first day of the conference. He says, on the first day of BSDCan, I arrived at the conference early to coordinate with the team that was going to record the talks. We selected the rooms that each of us would be in and to do the recording, and set up a group chat via WhatsApp, which happens to run on FreeBSD infrastructure, so they could coordinate it. And I personally would like to thank Roller and Patrick McAvoy and Calvin Hendricks Parker and everybody else who helped volunteer to run the video and streaming production at BSDCan, or just volunteered in some other way, even if it was just to carry a box. BSDCan's a lot of work, and the organizers can't do it all by themselves, so the volunteers are very important, and we hope that maybe you will volunteer next year.
Yeah, and the more people help, the easier it is.
Yep. He also attended some of the doc lounges and learned how to set up his computer to contribute to docs, and then he went to the Hacker Lounge. He says, there were already several tables full of people talking and working on various projects. In fact, there was a large group of people over in the corner giggling furiously as they collaborated on the new libtrue library. We talked a bit about that after BSDCan. And he says he did a little socializing and then got on his laptop and did some more work on the documentation using the new skills he acquired at the doc lounge. He goes on, I want to give a big thanks to the FreeBSD Foundation for approving my travel grant. It was a great experience to meet the community and participate in the discussions. I am very grateful that I was able to attend BSDCan. After visiting the doc lounge a few times, I managed to get comfortable using the tools required to edit the documentation. By the end of the conference, I had submitted 2 documentation patches to Bugzilla, with several patches still in progress. Prior to the conference, I expected that I would spend most of my time working quietly on my Onion Omega or EdgeRouter Lite projects, but I actually found that there was always something fun going on, and that I would rather do that and then work on other stuff when I got home. He says, I can always work on these projects later. He says, had a good time working with the FreeBSD community, and will continue working with them by editing documentations and submitting stuff via Bugzilla.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways there is just, turns out we're nice people and very approachable, and we're looking forward to having new people, not trying to scare them off.
Yeah, everything they were telling you about us is true. We're nice people, we want to get more people involved, and we're a friendly and welcoming community.
That's what I like about these trip reports, is not only is it a good way to find out how the donation money is being spent and so on, but I think especially when it's somebody's first time experience and they write about it, it can help share that experience and convince other people to try to come to their first conference and so on. And, hopefully more people will come out to conferences. If you're thinking about it, there are 3 conferences left this year. VBSDCan will be in Virginia in the US, September 7th to the 9th. You can go to vbsdcon.com for details on that one. EuroBSDCan will be in Paris, France, September 21st through 24th. That's eurobsdcon.org. And BSD Taiwan will be bsdtw.org, will be in Taipei, Taiwan, November 11th and 12th. The call for papers for that is still open, so please submit to that before the end of this month. July 31st is when that closes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to get into the community and, maybe write a similar report or have similar experience as Roller Angel did.
Mm-hmm.
So we have another trip report. This time it's on Undeadly because it's from Double P, who pretty much managed to get his... so he was the herder of the goat, and he pretty much after that experience set up his own Twitter account. So he's now Double-P, so people who want to look at that. And we also interviewed him on the show, of course. So the prologue starts with, most overheard in Tokyo was, "See you in Ottawa." So with additional personal item being Graph, I returned home to plan a trip to BSDCan. Dan was very helpful with getting at preparations, immigration handling, thanks for all that. Before I could start, I had to fix something, the handling of the goat. With a nicely created harness, I could just hang it along my backpack. Yeah, I saw that one, the goat buff, it was hanging on the ceiling, and I was looking up and seeing, oh, well, don't forget the goat when you leave. That was nice. Okay, so first off, the day where he traveled, so done that after the harness was made. He went to the airport of Hamburg and checked in for his itinerary of Hamburg, Munich, and then Toronto. That's Toronto, yeah. While the feeder leg has a common thing, boarding to Toronto was great. Cabin crew likes Graph. Yeah, apparently they have never seen stuffed ghosts before or something. Arriving in Montreal, it was Montreal, sorry, it wasn't, I mixed up the airport codes. So arriving in Montreal was like entering the monsoon zone or something. Sad. After the night, the weather was still rainish but improving, and I shuttled to Dorval via rail station to take me to Ottawa. Ever at Air Canada, right? Well, that's debatable. Train was late, but the conductor or so was nice to talk and wanted to know about Graph's Facebook page. Oh, does it have a Facebook page already?
I don't think so.
I need to check that out. To do for you as a home.
But yes, the random people you meet while you're carrying Graph around are always very interested in Graph. It's quite amusing.
Yep. Picking a cab in Ottawa to take me to the residence was easy at first, but then it was the wrong one. Yeah, they had one this year. Actually, my fault, and so I had a nice short walk to the actual one in the rain with wrong directions. Eventually I made it, and after unpacking refreshment, it was time to hit the goat bath. Okay, so day one. Since this was his first BSDCan, he didn't exactly know what to expect from this Birth of a Feather session or goat bath. But it was like we, the keeper, Dan and Alan, would talk about who's next and things like that. How mistaken he was. Besides the sheer amount of BSD people entering the not-so-huge Royal Oak, some Dexters sneaked in camouflage. Yeah, we reported that ourselves from our own experiences. Mm-hmm. The name giver got a proper position to oversee the mess, and I was glad I did not leave him behind after almost too many Creamories. Oh, that's
Creamories, it's a brand of
local beer. Mm.
Yeah.
See, that's me not drinking beer, not knowing all these brands.
I don't drink either.
Okay, day two. Something happened. It's crystal blue on the roof, and sun is trying to best to wake him up. So start the day, he picks up breakfast and Father and Sons. I can really recommend that. Yep, I've been there this year a couple of times as well. Very nice homemade fries, almost hash browns, and fast delivery. Stopped off, he trotted along to get Peter Hessler's tutorials about BGP for sysadmins and developers. Peter did a great job, but the lab couldn't happen, since, oh surprise, the Wi-Fi was sluggish as hell. Most love to the first day of the conference every time. Yeah, it's always this number of people concentrating in a couple of rooms, and the Wi-Fi is not being able to handle that. But then the U90 people are helpful and fix the Wi-Fi for us. So we went after that to the hack room in U90 just to fix stuff at home. IPsec was giving pains again. Time to pick food and beer afterwards, and since it's so easy to reach, we went to the Oak again. Having a nice backyard patio experience, it was about time to meet new people. Cheers to Tom, Aaron, Nick, Philip, and some more. We had an awesome night there, and they also invited some not really computer locals that he knew by other means who was completely overwhelmed by what kind of nerds gather around BSD. He planned to stay a beer, and it was rather some more, and 6 hours. Wow. Looks like we made some impressions on him. Okay, on to day 3. Day 3, easy day. No tutorials at hand, so first picking up breakfast at Father and Sons again and moving to hack room in U90. Since he promised Peter Hessler to help with a localized lab setup, he started to hack on a quick Vagrant and Ansible setup to mimic his BGP lab and went quickly through most of it. Plus some more IPsec debugging and finally fixing it, we went early in the general direction of the red line to pick up our registration pack. But before that could happen, it was called to have shawarma at 3 brothers along. Yeah, the shawarma is similar to the German Döner, so he probably wanted to see the difference and similarities in that one. Given a tight hangover, it wasn't the brightest idea to order a poutine. Might be great the other day. It wasn't for me at the very first time and had to throw away most of it. Oh, well, it's not for everyone. Eventually, passing on to the red line, he made the next failure with just running into the pub. Please stay at the front desk until seated. I never get used to this concept. So, after being properly seated, we take our beers and the registration can commence after we had half of it. So I register it myself. By the way, it's a great idea to grant not needed stuff to charity, so don't pick up just because. Think about it if you really need this or that gadget.
Yeah, so what he's talking about there is the swag bags that you get with the BSDCan printing and stuff on them. If you don't want it, you can leave it at registration, or if you're going to use it, but donate it at the end of the conference, then they donate them to the homeless shelter so that they can give people the bag to take their food home in or whatever, and they find use for them.
Then he goes on to register Gruff. Of course, he needs badges. Like, there can't be any more. There can only be so many
Gruff
badges
has
on
quite
Gruff.
a few badges.
Just to have Drew Levine coming back to me sometime later on to hand me a badge for Henning. That's just amazing. I don't know if I want to break this vicious circle the other day, since it's so funny.
I think he's been mistaken for Henning relatively frequently.
Yeah, that can happen. I mean, it's like between Alan and me, they always... Yeah. Well, the mix-ups aren't happening that often, but we look similar.
I don't think anybody's ever mixed me up with you that much. Apparently somebody mixed your brother up with you, right?
Yeah. That's a funny story, but a different time. So he talked to Theo about the ongoing IPsec problems, and he taught him about the utrace, which looks complicated, but might be an end to the story the other day. Also, he had a nice talk to Peter Hessler about some other ideas along books. Oh, no, that's not Peter Hessler. Peter Hanstein, sorry. Because Peter Hanstein is the one who writes the books.
Yep.
Yeah. By the way, did I pay for ongoing beers? I think Tom did. What a guy. Okay, arriving at the residence, I had to find my bathroom door locked. Special thing. Crazy thing is they don't have a master key at the venue, but I have to call in one from elsewhere. Short night shortened by another 30 minutes. Well. You don't get much sleep at BSDCan anyway. Yeah. Day 4. So weather is improving into beach and sun levels, and it's conference day. Yeah! The opening keynote from Geist was very interesting. Citation needed. Afterwards, I went to ZFS over SSH. That was your talk, Alan. Nothing really new.
Right.
Sorry there.
He saw it in Tokyo, so it wasn't that different.
Yeah. But then Jason had a super interesting talk on how to apply BSD for the healthcare system in Australia. I hope I can help him in the last bits, the R domains, in that end. Yeah, that would be nice. While at lunch, he tried to recall his memories about utrace while talking to Theo. And then it was about time to present his talk. And I think it was well received. Well, yeah, I think so too. One not so good feedback was about not taking the audience more into account. I think I was asking every other 5 slides or so, but well. The general feedback in spoken terms was quite good. I was a bit confused, and I did likely a better job in Tokyo, but well. So the feedback he's talking about is the feedback that people can provide at the BSDCan websites. Mm-hmm. At each talk, there's a little feedback section. And people can still do that if they've seen the video recordings, they can still provide feedback. It's not
it's locked out. As one of the speakers, it's really helpful to get people's thoughts on it so that I can do better next time.
Mm-hmm. That date closes with they ended up in the Oak again. Thanks to Michael W. Lucas, Shrikdog, SNG, Peter H. What was that one? Oh, that's Peter Henstein again, I think. Kurt M. For having him there. Okay, fine. Day 5. While the weather had to decide what next, he rushed to the venue just to gather Reich's talk about VMD. And afterwards, it was MSTP from Philip Peps, which was very interesting. And OpenBSD, should also look into it. So as a project, there's some cross-pollination going on there. Then the bug buff happened, which is the Birds of a Feather session for people who are running or trying to run BSD user groups. And he invited all of the coastal Germans to cbug.de. So if you haven't seen that one, check out that webpage if you're in Germany, in the northern coastal area. I had to run off for other reasons and came back to Dave's talk, which was awesome. Okay, good to know. Following what was Rod Grimes' talk, well, while I see his case, that was very poor. Okay. The auction into closing was awesome again, and I spent $50 on a t-shirt. Yeah, it's all going to charity. Epilogue of that report is that he totally got the exit dates wrong. So first cancel a booking on a hotel and then rebook the train to Montreal. So I have plenty of time in the morning to get breakfast with the local guy. After that, he drives me to Via Rail Station and I dig into business cushions. Well, see you in Ottawa. Or how about Paris, Taipei? Hey, great. That's a nice report.
Yeah. Very detailed.
So Philip,
this week's episode is brought to you by IX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com/BSD Now and check out what they can do for you. They have the latest and greatest selection of Intel processors, whether you need something small and low power, or something bigger, or something even bigger, or something even bigger than that.
Yeah, all the way up
to... Whether you want something practically embedded, something to go under your desk, a workstation, a small server, a bigger server, an even bigger server, or a huge server, or an entire rack of servers, they can do it.
Yep, and they're custom built for your specifications or for your problem. So if you call them and say, I need a server for this and that specific use case, they will tell you what kind of server they wanted to build for you.
If you tell them what you want to do with it, they can help you pick the right parts. There's a line of Intel processors I didn't even know existed. There's there's a new kind of middle ground between like the E3 1275s and so on and the E5s. There's like an E3 1500 series. Didn't even know that existed. So they really are the people you want to talk to if you're trying to build a server to run some BSD or any open source really. Or, even if you have to run not open source, they're still the best people to talk to.
Yeah. So check out ixsystems.com/BSD Now for a server buying guide where you can read up and find exactly what kind of steps you should take and what other vendors might not provide you with, which IX Systems does. So check that out and tell them we sent you.
So, the next story is Bind Broker from our friend Ted Unangst. So, in this blog post, Ted has a single big server and lots of users that all want to share it. And he wants to run, and most of them want to run web servers and other stuff like that. He's like, could use virtual machines or something, but, think of the RAM. And so he says, this would be great, but alas, archaic decisions made long ago mean that network sockets aren't really files, and there's this weird concept of privileged ports, where certain port numbers can only be used by root. We could assign each user a virtual machine and let them do whatever they want, but that would be wasteful. Think of the megabytes. Maybe we could set up nginx.conf to proxy all incoming connections to a process of the user's choosing, but that's only really works for websites, and we want to be protocol neutral here. I think Relay D is actually slightly better at being protocol neutral, but anyway. Maybe we could use IP tables or PF or something, but nobody really wants to do that. What we really need is a bind broker. At some level, there needs to be some kind of broker that assigns IPs to users and resolves any conflicts. It should be possible to build something of this nature given just the existing Unix tools we already have, instead of changing the system design. Then we can deploy our broker to existing systems without upgrading or disrupting the ongoing operations. The bind broker watches a directory for the creation by a regular user of Unix domain socket files. Then it binds to the TCP port of the same name and transfers traffic between that port and that actual socket.
Interesting.
A more complete problem specification is as follows. A top-level directory, which contains subdirectories named after each IP address. Each user is assigned a subdirectory, which they have write permission to. Inside each subdirectory, the user may create Unix domain sockets named according to the port they wish to bind to. You might be able to assign the user Alice 10.0.0.5 and the user Bob 10.0.0.10. Then Alice can run a web server by binding to net/10.0.0.5/80. And Bob could run his mail server by binding to net/10.0.0.10/25. This maps IP ownership, which doesn't really exist in Unix, although FreeBSD jails have not ownership, but restriction, to the file system namespace, which already has everything we need to deal with permissions. So yes, I think this is actually a really cool idea. So it's a bit different than jails, where jails are, you can create a jail and give it one IP address, and inside the jail you can't use any other IP address, but that doesn't let you get down to individual ports and so on. So it says, the broker is responsible for watching each directory. As new sockets are created, it should respond by binding to the appropriate port. When a socket is deleted, the network side socket should be closed as well. Whenever every connection is accepted on the network side, a matching connection is made to the Unix side, and then traffic is copied across. So he thought, this can't be that hard to do, right? He's like, it should only be about 200 lines of code. So he actually started with some example code. One to scan the directory for IP addresses, and then to scan each of those directories for port numbers and add them to a tail queue list so he could bind the ports. And he's got the function to bind the ports and an event loop that uses the K events to watch the directory and automatically trigger the program every time something changes. He says there's no completely portable way to watch a directory for changes. He's using a K event extension, which is OpenBSD and I think FreeBSD specific. Otherwise, we might consider a timeout and polling with fstat or some other system-specific interface or some abstraction layer over such an interface so they could be more portable. Otherwise, if one of our mappings is ready to read or accept, we have a new connection to handle. He says, the first half is straightforward. We accept the connection and make a matching connect call on the Unix side. Then I broke out the big cheat stick. Instead of having to copy data back and forth, he used the OpenBSD socket splice code to just weld the two sockets together and let the kernel take care of passing data back and forth and not have to do it in the event loop in his program. In reality, you'd have to set up a read, copy, write loop for each end to copy traffic between them. That's not very interesting to read, though, so you just cheated there.
I like those code samples because they could pretty much be used for anything. I mean, if people just want to look at how you would scan a certain directory on a host, the code is pretty much there, and they just have to change it for the purpose they want to have it.
So at the end, he actually has a completed program that does this. It turns out to be 232 lines according to word count. If you subtract the includes blank lines and lines containing nothing but braces, it's only 148 lines of stuff that actually gets executed by the computer. Add some error handling and work on the reading and writing code, and 200 lines seems about right.
Yeah, that's pretty much the number he proposed.
Yeah. He says, the code as given isn't very portable. The system interfaces used, like K-event and splicing, can be replaced with generic POSIX interfaces. The splicing code doesn't even work on OpenBSD because it's not yet possible to splice sockets from different domains, which is like, an internet domain socket and a Unix domain socket. He says, I wouldn't want the answer key to be too easy to steal, because he was saying this could be an interesting programming assignment. Bonus points if you fix the kernel side instead of switching away from slicing, but actually fix the feature. He says, I wrote all of the directory scanning code first, then the directory watching code, so there's some obvious inefficiencies there. The list of map ports could be tied to a directory, which would spare scanning the whole list every time. But
all right.
He's got all the code there.
Yeah, pretty much the whole thing can be used by other people for the basis of similar things, or just a small function could be taken out of that and reused in different ways.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea, and when I read this last night, when I was writing the show notes for it, I was thinking it'd be cool to actually create a virtual file system that does this. So, a virtual one like /dev, and maybe /dev/net, but as a separate file system, and it would have directories for 0.0.0.0 and all of your IP addresses, and then each inside of those, it could have all the port numbers or whatever. You might actually make each port number a directory and then have files in it and be able to control stuff, but it's hard to say how you would end up actually doing it. But define all that, and then some config file that defines the rules to apply the permissions to it, and you could do some pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, so as a little broker example, that might be something worth exploring.
Yeah, so this is just, an idea he had and whipped up for fun, but I suppose it could actually be useful for some things.
Yeah, if you got inspired by this, send us your crazy ideas at feedback@bsdnow.tv. So it's time for our news roundup this week, starting with daemons and friendly ninjas. This is about CMake. So this blog post pretty much describes the use of CMake and some interesting statistics you could build. So starting off with, there's quite a lot of software that uses CMake as a meta build system. A quick count at the FreeBSD ports tree shows me that 1,110 ports, well, pretty much over 1,000, use it. And CMake generates build system files, which then direct the actual build. It doesn't do building itself. So that's important. That's where the meta build system comes in. There are multiple build system backends available in regular usage. CMake generates make files and does a reasonable job of producing make files that work for GNU and for BSD Make. But it can generate Ninja or Visual Studio and other build system files. It's quite flexible in this regard. Recently, the KDE FreeBSD team has been working on Qt Web Engine, which is horrible. It contains a complete Chromium and who knows what else. Rebuilding it takes forever. But Tobias, KDE-FreeBSD, and Koz, GNOME-FreeBSD, noticed that building things with the Ninja backend was considerably faster for some packages, like the Qt Web Engine and Evolution Data Thingy. Tobias wanted to try to extend the build time improvements to all the CMake-based ports in FreeBSD, and over the past few days this has been a success. So ports built using CMake now default to using Ninja as a build system backend. And there's a table provided that shows the build times with the size that's been generated, the Gmake time it take, and the Ninja build times. And pretty much in all of these, the Ninja build times actually are faster in this regard. So there's less time needed for
WebKit 2, the build time is about 7 minutes faster, taking 37 minutes instead of 45.
That's considerable. Mm-hmm. And there's an even more thorough table, results from TC Burner and who did 5 builds of each with and without Ninja. Yeah, that's also a good way of shaking out the statistical errors that might be in there. He cut out the raw data, and the table has just the average of 5 results, showing usually a slight improvement in build time with Ninja. So not everything builds properly with Ninja. This is usually due to missing dependencies that CMake does not cover. This shows up when foo depends on bar, but no rule is generated for it. Depending on build order and speed, bar may be there already by the time foo gets around to being built. Doxygen showed this, where builds on one CPU core were all fine, but 8 cores would blow up occasionally. Yeah, that's a different problem to solve here. In many cases, they found and fixed the missing implicit dependencies in ports and upstreams, but some things are intractable or just really need GNU make. For this, the FreeBSD ports infrastructure now has a knob attached to CMake for switching a port build to GNU make. And they provide the port switches in the notes as well. So there's pretty much uses flags that you are probably familiar with if you are in FreeBSD ports land. And he closes with, for the majority of users, this has no effect. But for our package building clusters and for KDE-FreeBSD developers who build a lot of CMake build system software in a day, it may add up an extra coffee break. So I'll raise a shot of espresso to friendship between daemons and ninjas. Oh yes, yeah.
That's an
so
interesting
all
word.
these, all these package builders and the porters, people that are just making sure that KDE ports work, and since they build so long and have so many dependencies to create first before they can build the actual final binary, that's pretty significant for them to shave off a couple of seconds or even minutes from the build. Because remember, these are the packages that you get when you do package install. Okay, great story. And
so next we have the announcement of package source. Second quarter package set is now available, including some highlights like GCC 7.1, Firefox 54, the latest version of Mate, Ruby, Ruby on Rails, TextLive, Thunderbird, Zen, etc. The removal of some old stuff like Ruby 1.8 and Ruby 2.1, and enhanced support for SSP, Fortify, and Railroad, as well as adding support for used languages for newer C++ standards.
Okay. So package source people might want to get to that one, to the quarter 2 branch, to get their latest and greatest software versions from that.
Yep, some interesting stats here. 210 new packages were added, 43 old packages were removed, and 1,780 packages were updated since the Q1 release.
Yeah, those are the package source updates we have. And our sponsor for the next section is DigitalOcean. Go to digitalocean.com and you will find their latest offerings because they have announced the availability of high CPU droplets now for compute-intensive applications.
Yep, so that means now, starting at $40 a month or 6 cents an hour, you can get a machine with 3 gigabytes of RAM and 2 dedicated vCPUs, meaning they'll never be, the core is dedicated to you and never shared with another VM. And they include 5 terabytes of transfer.
Oh, wow.
You have to about 4 times as much CPU. For $80, you can get 4 dedicated vCPUs.
That's quite some stuff you could do.
Because they're high CPU usage, you don't pay extra. You don't pay extra for disk space you don't necessarily need. Just RAM and CPU.
Yeah, so if you want to run your data analysis on your DigitalOcean droplet, you get the horsepower and the brain power for doing that. Exactly.
Yeah, and they still also have the high memory instances. If you need memory instead of cores, they have that as well. Or they have their standard mix where you get a little bit of everything. In addition, they have their storage offerings where you can get block storage starting at just 10 cents a gig per month for exactly as many gigabytes as you need. And they have their fancy networking features now. On top of the load balancer that we've been talking about for a while, they have their cloud firewall and the floating IPs so that you can actually have one virtual IP address and move it between different machines as needed.
Yeah, which is great because the more machines you have, the more flexible you can move them around and switch IP addresses and all kinds of crazy things you can do, like you would do on your local network. You can now do also the same things in the cloud.
Yep. And they have all the team features you need, which is very important as well.
Yeah, collaborations and one account, multiple teams, for example. So we have one single login and everyone on your team can access up to 10 of those teams. And you can also invite members and work with them on projects you are doing in the cloud.
Yeah, they also have snapshots, so you can snapshot your VM and roll back to it if something goes wrong, or clone it, the snapshot, to make another version of it. And the storage for those is only 5 cents per gigabyte per month. And they also offer backups for 20% of the cost. So a backup of a $5 droplet is only $1 a month.
Yeah, which is quite cheap for a cloud provider, actually, and that's what you want to have as a user. Cool features and cheap pricing.
So next up, we have Ted Unix summarizing some of the recent changes going into OpenBSD.
Yeah, it's a whole lot, but we picked out the ones that jumped right into our eye. Starting with plugging some leaks. So to compile kernels with umask 007 and install them minus the read permissions. So that's an important...
So the kernels are not readable by default because you read them before. They also randomized the link order of kernels. We talked a little bit about that. So basically, on boot up, once the system is multi-user mode, it relinks the kernel and saves it so that next time you reboot, it'll be different than last time. They also backed out Futex support in librthread, but then it went back in. Not a particularly interesting change, but made it possible by the fact that librthread is ABI opaque and properly inherited from its predecessor, libpthread. Functions like pthread mutex lock take a pointer to a pthread mutex t, which is itself actually a pointer, not a struct. They have pure preprocessor implementations of the ROF macros .ec and .eo. Though do be warned that very bad things will happen to anybody who tries to use one of these macros in an OpenBSD manual page. Some tmux changes. They added support for SIG-user2 to stop and start logging for an existing server, be more strict about escape sequences that rename windows or set titles, and add a timeout to prevent a sequence which wait for a specific terminator before and then waiting forever and locking up the pane. They also extended the randomized linking stuff we just talked about to the ARM64 port, as well as Octeon, Alpha, and HPPA. There's some variation by platform because each architecture has the kernel loaded with different flavors of initial physical and virtual mappings, and the LAN disk and so on. And they extended it to Longsung and SGI and the Mac PPC and so on. They also have an errata for the Perl file : path module because of a race condition. They enabled the compiler flag wrapv by default with Clang to treat signed integer overflows as defined rather than undefined behavior. There's still a lot of code which assumes overflows work in predictable ways. Tracking it all down and adding wrapv to hundreds of makefiles only means some programs will inevitably be missed. Rewriting the XBF driver to handle 64K transfers so that you can do larger transfers at once. On OpenBSD, max fizz value is 64K. I think on FreeBSD it's 128K, which is actually kind of a minimum as the transfer size that a disk device must support from the file system side. It's the maximum request that can be issued with a guarantee that the request will succeed barring extreme hardware failure. Previously, the XBF driver was limited to 44 kilobytes, which made the file system code sad.
Oh, wow, it's really
a bunch of other stuff, including pledge violations to the accounting reporting tool, fix potential attack against cron, and a bunch of other interesting stuff in here.
They also mentioned Carl, which is, we mentioned a couple of shows back, the kernel address randomized link. And there seems to be a couple of upcoming talks coming about those topics listed in the event. Not only those here, but also some others they are working on. So we should be looking out for more OpenBSD talks at future conferences. Yeah, so check out the full notes.
Yeah, they replaced all usage of the TIOC STI in CSH using the more common IO loop. And there's a whole post about why that is that way, if you want to dig into it. They also revamped some of the authentication logging in SSH and added a verbose flag to RM so that it will print out the name of each file as it deletes it, which is very handy. I didn't know they didn't have that. They updated libexpat to version 2.2.1, which has some security fixes. Never trust an expat, that's my motto. They also updated the Intel DRM code to be based on Linux 4.4.7 or 70. This brings support for Skylake and Cherry View and better support for Broadwell and Valley View. It also adds MST support, so fun times for people with newish laptops.
Tempting, yeah. Cool. So great updates from OpenBSD, and also a new big release from OpenSense. So this is version 17.1.9 has been released.
Right. So it's not a big release, it's a small one.
Yeah, but looking through the number of changes, could be a major release. But yeah, if it's just a small one, that's also fine. So 17.7, they mention, is almost here, which means they have skipped over alpha and beta phase due to the fact that the base system is staying on FreeBSD 11, and what you can expect is a release candidate within a week and smooth transitions. Okay.
Yeah, so the main thrust of this release was addressing the stack clash stuff in the base system, as well as updating OpenVPN bind and curl for security issues that they had encountered.
Mm-hmm.
But they also have a list of changes that happened to the firewall, to the web interface, the VPN setup, the DNS server, and updates to a bunch of their plugins, including Zabbix, HA Proxy, Acme Client for Let's Encrypt, Tink, which is a VPN software, and Monet.
Mm-hmm. Great, and they close with "Stay safe, the OpenSense team." Time for our Beastie Bits section, starting with ThinkPad X230, trying to get the trackpoint and touchpad working in X. So this is on the Dragonfly BSD lists. Mm-hmm. And apparently they figured out, based on feedback from folks, that some additional searching and digging brought demashed output on the Linux section, OpenBSD and FreeBSD, on that particular laptop, and they provided instructions how to make it work. So you add basically 3 lines to your etc rc.conf, moused enable, moused type, and moused port. And once you did that, the etc x11 xorg conf was auto-generated by the xorg configure, worked A-OK, and picked up the mouse. And that seems to be the solution for that problem.
They complain that the touchpad is awfully small, but I don't remember it being that small. I'd have to go look at the X230 in the other room.
Yeah, but now, is that also working on FreeBSD? Because we pretty much...
Yes, that one just works out of the box on FreeBSD.
Ah, okay. So there's some specifics on Dragonfly BSD.
It's relatively similar to X220. It's just slightly newer. It's got the newer keyboard, though, which is some people don't like.
Okay, so if you're experiencing the same problem on Dragonfly BSD, there's the solution.
Yep.
Next up is that FreeBSD deprecates all R commands. Note, these are the RCP, rlogin, and etc, not RM.
Yes,
what's
so
that about,
just,
Alan?
An old set of tools that let you do stuff remotely. Like RCP was how you copied files to a remote system before SCP became a thing. The problem is it does it not securely. Whereas, SCP and SSH instead of RSH, right? So RSH was the shell. RCP was copy tool. Rlogin was the way to log in, which is different than a shell. Ruptime was for checking the uptime, and Rwho was for checking who was logged into the remote machine. Most of those have been replaced with secure alternatives based on SSH, right? SCP, SSH, etc. And then, Ruptime and Rwho, you're just expected to SSH in and do it rather than have special commands for it. Because the uptime of a remote machine isn't all that. You don't need a dedicated tool to tell that.
Yeah.
But yes, those tools are going to be removed in the next version of FreeBSD. So I added a warning to the man pages of all of those tools, and it will be in the release notes and everything so that people have a bit of warning if for some reason they're still using these tools, but they really shouldn't be.
Don't, yeah.
It hasn't been advisable to use these tools since I started using BSD when I was like 16. So
yeah, use the secure alternatives by all means.
Yes.
It's way better. Okay, next up is Bashfill art for your terminals. So this seems something like draw here. So let's say draw a little smiley here. Oh, I can see colors and shapes appearing. And now you can switch colors and that's nice. So you can do drawing in the terminal. So that's always what I hear from people. Oh yeah, terminal is nice, but you cannot do any graphics on it. Well, now you can show them what you can do in the graphics part.
Right. So in the top bit here, you draw a picture using your mouse and so on. And then if you look down here, it is generating a script of your drawing that you can then use as a shell script, and it will print out your drawing.
Interesting. That might be something I can engage the students with that I'm going to have in the winter term.
It is quite interesting.
But why does it need bin bash? That's what I'm saying as the
because they use
notorious.
bash, yeah.
But can't it be done with just bin sh?
I don't think the echo built in regular sh does colors by default.
Oh, okay.
A couple things like that.
Other than that, the function looks fine. Other than don't need function.
Do most of this, I think, in regular sh. It would just be a bit different and a bit longer.
Yeah, this is me being pedantic, but still,
yes.
The commands are all
Pretty
there
cool.
and can be used as people want to have some drawing done on your terminal. Good. And next up is a little call for help. So Go 1.9 in the release notes mentions that NetBSD support is broken, and they want people to help with that. So they provide a link to GitHub and the show notes. It says that Go stopped running NetBSD builders during the Go 1.9 development cycle due to persistent hangs and kernel crashes up to and including NetBSD 7.1, and any help investigating or solving the issue that's been linked there and the bugs that are coming up with that would be appreciated. In the meantime, they can't recommend running Go on NetBSD. Well, that would be bad, so people should look into that and fix it.
So as of 3 days ago, fixes for Golang were backported into NetBSD 7.0.3, 7.1.1, 7.2, and 8.0. They will be released as soon as they're ready, but apparently not in too distant of a date. So this appears to be mostly fixed, but not actually released in a version yet.
Oh, good. Okay, there is progress been made, and they just need to do the integration bits. And
then we got a cool one I saw on Twitter this morning called Jest. It's a REST API for creating and managing jails. So it's a Go program, and you use it via a REST HTTP API, and you can create and manage jails with it.
Oh, interesting. So just using curl and doing some post commands, you can...
Yeah, so in this one, if you do a get on just jails with curl, you get a list of all the running jails and their settings, and then you can use a post with curl to create a new jail, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And they also have templates, snapshots, and config section where you can query an updated Jest configuration for a particular agent. Cool. That's worth checking out. What's also cool to check out is Thar Snap, which is sponsoring our feedback and question section this week. So Thar Snap is your online backup for the truly paranoid. Because if you're doing backups, and you should do backups, you should properly secure them, because everyone can access those, but not on Thar Snap. You are the only person holding the key to the actual decryption without anyone else being able to decrypt it, because it's stored on your local system and encrypted there, and then it's put into the cloud.
Yep.
Check out Thar Snap. It has all kinds of, if you know how to use Thar, then you can pretty much get started right away with it. It has binaries for the most popular Linux distributions, the FreeBSD, NetBSD, and OpenBSDs of this world, as well as macOS 10 and Windows subsystem for Linux.
So moving on to questions.
Yep. The first question this week that we have is from John about ZFS send and receive. It starts with, "Hi guys, I back up to an external USB drive for offsite backup, but computer says no. I have done this many, many times before with the same hardware. I'm currently on FreeNAS 11.0 RC4. I'm trying to send this data set, which is of course all my family photos. So there's a data store / photos, 488 gigabytes currently used, and roughly 1 terabyte. Is that the total storage? I don't have the column numbers right now, the column descriptions. But anyway, it's 488 gigs.
Used space, free space, and referred space.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So he tries to think what would help us, help me. So here you go. First, he has cleared all snapshots, shown as no results below. So if you do ZFS list on his machine, then you pretty much get no results. And then I create a snapshot and check if it exists. So ZFS snapshot -r for his data store / photos, snap 001. And if you list that now, you see the snapshot, and it core dumps. Oh, interesting. And now if you do the ZFS send -R data store photos, that exact snapshot we just created, to ZFS receive with -F DUV, 1 terabyte USB drive, that's the name of his drive, and so it starts normally receiving full stream, and then it gets an internal error, invalid argument, and dumps core, so this way. The daily FreeNAS emails shows me these issues. So there's swap pager, indefinite wait buffer. That's an indication. So that core dumped, and there's something wrong in that section with something with the swap pager. Results afterwards is that if you list the snapshots, you get all the snapshots from the data store as expected, and the zpool status all looks okay. So there's the zpool status output, nothing unusual, no errors, no drives offline. So what's the problem here, Alan?
It's hard to tell. I would assume this is a problem with the release candidate FreeNAS, and that upgrading, now that 11.0 has been released fully, upgrading to that likely will fix it, because that's extra weird. Also, the fact that you're having problems with your swap seems to increase the likelihood of your problems being related to that.
Yeah.
The other recommendation is on your ZFS send command, if you include the -v there, it will print out how much data is copied once a second, letting you know how far it's actually gotten. Though, if you have 488 gigs to copy, it's going to take some hours.
The receive options look fine, actually, FDUV.
Yep.
Could it be that so all the core dumps that were taken before that are now coupling up the swap space? No, that's unusual.
Nothing like that. If ZFS is crashing, it's definitely likely something wrong with the operating system. So I would move up to the latest version of FreeNAS and see if it goes away.
Or check out the FreeNAS forums. Maybe they have an idea or similar issues encountered before and have a solution for you.
The Signal 6 suggests it's definitely either a problem with that the swap error is causing something not to work right, or something else. Something is definitely fishy with that system. It's not ZFS's fault.
Maybe memory is too full and then it has to swap in the first place?
Sure, but it's definitely having a problem doing something with the swap. So.
Anyway,
Next question.
That might hopefully give you some indications. Next up is Callum with a laptops question. So it begins with, "Hi BSD Now team. A data point for Andy who was asking about laptops for BSD. I have the latest model Dell XPS 13 and it's not a good candidate for BSD at this stage, or when I last tried in early 2017. Firstly, you need to switch the NVMe drive to AHCI mode in the BIOS. This, along with some EFI trickery, allowed him to boot and install TrueOS on it. However, there's a hang at boot when loading one of the drives. the drivers, which you can control C out of. And after KLD loading the graphics driver by hand, X will start, although with a 3200 by 1800 resolution, everything is too small to read. Trackpad works okay. I'm pretty sure the touchscreen doesn't work. However, the biggest...
So for the resolution, there's a DPI setting in the login screen of TrueOS where you can change it so that it'll make everything bigger.
Yeah, better to read. The biggest issue he mentions is the Wi-Fi and SD card devices are not recognized, so there isn't much more you can do with that, which is terribly interesting. Dell does sell a developer's edition with pre-installed Linux of some description, but I believe the only difference compared with the standard version is that the NVMe mode is set correctly to begin with. I haven't been bothered to try the Linux install, as that doesn't interest me much. I see what you did there. I had thought to try Dragonfly or OpenBSD at some stage, as I believe their Wi-Fi drivers are a little more advanced in some instances. Okay, that might be worth
Thanks for the
exploring.
information. And then he has a follow-up email.
The follow-up email, it's also linked in the show notes for you to delve into.
So he tried to install the latest TrueOS snapshot from the 1st of June, and the good news is that the installation process and booting of the system afterwards is much smoother, although I had to wipe the original install and partition from Windows in order to use, or for the USB boot to work, otherwise I wanted to keep using the ZFS root from the disk. Post-installation, I selected Intel video drivers, suggested was VESA, and this works fine. Default fonts are too tiny on the high resolution. Trackpad, including two-finger scrolling and tap to click, is working, as does sound. However, still no wireless or Bluetooth devices, no touchscreen, no SD card. According to PCIconf-LV, the wireless is a Qualcomm Atheros QCA 6172 802.11ac. This is apparently in the Linux Ath10K driver, but it hasn't made its way into BSDs yet. The card reader is a Realtek RTS 525A. So hope that helps anyone who's considering an XPS 13.
Okay. Yeah, more laptop experience from our users. It's great to share this on the show so people can make more educated buying decisions. Cool. Next up is Lars about Snapshot on VM data disk. He starts with, "Hi guys, I'm a listener of the show since day one and have asked questions before. Currently I'm setting up systems with Beehive and ZFS and came across the following. I'm running Beehive on an up-to-date FreeBSD 11.0 system with with ZFS. I'm using VM Beehive as my Beehive manager. The system is on its own pool, 2-disk mirror, and the VMS are another pool, also 2-disk mirror. The VM Beehive uses ZVols for the virtual machine disks. One of my VMs has a second disk for the data. The virtual memory, the virtual machine OS is also FreeBSD, and he can perfectly make a snapshot of that data disk on his Beehive system, but then the ZFS mastery book states that you can mount a snapshot, but not in this case. Probably at this is a ZVol. I've also tried to send and receive a snapshot to a normal local data set on the Beehive system itself, but then I get all sorts of permission errors, although the ZFS send and receive was carried out as root. Does what I want to make any sense?"
It depends what errors you were getting and what you were doing.
Permission errors?
But yes, you can't mount a snapshot of a ZVol because that's not a file system, it's a block device. And then send and receive...
it's probably the same.
You can't send a ZVol into a regular data set. That doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's a virtual disk, not a data set, or can't be made to a data set. I thought that using snapshot of my VM data disk is a good way to make backups of my data, but it seems that I cannot access the data of the snapshot in any way. Am I overlooking something?
No. So if you have a clone of the ZVol, or if you have the VM not running, then the ZVol will contain all the data from your VM, and you can back it up. I'm planning to back it up. But yeah, a ZVol and a ZFS dataset are completely, or a ZVol and a ZFS file system are not the same thing, and you can't intermix the two.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually have the same setup at work, but I never had, so I do regular snapshots, but I never had to roll back to any of those. So that might be something I need to figure out before it's too late, or it's actually needed. Anyway, I want to be able to get back any files if deleted accidentally, or should I use NFS or a ZFS volume dataset or on any other system like a FreeNAS box on the data for this virtual machine?
Right. So generally what you want to do is if you take a snapshot of the ZVol, then you can always do a ZFS rollback to get back that data. Or you can do ZFS clone on the snapshot to make a new ZVol that contains that snapshot. And then you can, that will exist as a device and you can mount it and use it in the VM or whatever. But yeah, you can't mount a ZVol snapshot because it's a block device, not a file system. So you can't mount it. There's no mounting of ZVols. You can replicate the snapshot to another machine, and that works as well, yes.
Yeah, so in the bottom of the message, he pretty much has it figured out. He learned that his virtual machine using the data disk has to be switched off to make a proper snapshot, as you said, Alan. By proper, I mean one that can be rolled back. So the sequence is switch off the VM, make the snapshot, and switch the VM back on. And to be able to roll back a snapshot of the data disk, you have to switch off the VM, roll back the snapshot of the data disk, and switch the VM back on.
Yeah, because of caching running in the OS, you can't roll back the ZVol while the VM is running. That would go really badly.
It wouldn't be consistent, yeah.
Yeah. If you check out the talk from BSDCan for doing snapshots of beehives, or like checkpoints, there's actually, it's not ready yet, but there will be a feature where you'll be able to pause a VM and take a consistent disk snapshot and even a memory snapshot so that you could roll the whole machine back to a state, including the memory.
I actually need to try this now at work. I'm like, ooh, I was pretty happy that we didn't have to roll back to this one, but maybe one day.
In general, you can take a snapshot of the VM while it's running. However, the snapshot will possibly have some stuff not written inside the VM, right? It'll be, if inside the VM it's ZFS, it'll be okay. If it's UFS, then you're going to need to FSCK when you.
It's a Linux VM.
Well, yeah. Then it's going to be, if that VM breaks or something and you roll back to that snapshot, it's going to be like the power had gone off and come back on at exactly that second, and so it's going to have to recover from that. With some VM software, you have the ability to coordinate with the VM inside and basically have it flush all the stuff to disk and be consistent, and then take the snapshot and then resume. Like, I think you can do that in Zen. Check out Roger's talk about Zen and FreeBSD and ZFS from FOSDEM 2016. And it has a demo of him doing that with a NUC at the conference.
Yeah. So you pretty much solved your own question, but we independently gave the same recommendations. Okay, and last one for this week is Daryl with Jail Managers. So Daryl writes that he's looking to combine his Plex and NAS for free servers to one box, and setting up NAS for free is his only experience with BSD so far. Well, everyone has to start somewhere. I would like to learn more, which is why I'd like to get Plex running on a jail on my FreeNAS box, and working 2 jobs limits my time for studying and learning. In one article I'm reading about setting up Plex Media Server on NAS for free, it recommends installing the brig to make creating and managing jails easier. The freebsd.org docs explains managing jails using EasyJail. Do you recommend using a jail manager? Is the brig or EasyJail manager you would recommend? Would I even bother with a manager if I want to learn more about using BSD, considering I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to learning right now?
I would say EasyJail is faster to learn. I've actually never heard of this one called the brig.
I think it seems to be the NAS for free specific. But I would start with a manager, and once you get a couple of, Well, it's actually backwards. Usually you would start doing it all by yourself and then finding out the ugly bits and then doing it with a jail manager. But since you have less time and you want to get something running, you should start with a jail manager, and then maybe if you have more time, do it manually just to see how the jails are actually working, because the jail managers hide many aspects of the jail creation and the jail running aspects. EasyJail is fine. There's also IOCage and others. Try out what suits your needs best or which works best for you, and then go ahead with those. We have a sometime later follow-up. So it's Daryl again. I wrote an email earlier about jail managers for containing his Plex media server. Instead of jails, I could virtualize my existing NAS for free install and also virtualize PMS using Beehive. I'm looking for something that doesn't require a lot of knowledge, but will teach me more about BSDs. Same thing. There's Beehive and there's Beehive managers. So if you want to get more into the gears and how it works internally, then do it manually. But if you get stuck, then the managers are there to pretty much set you up a Beehive or a jail in no time, and you can just start running your services in a jail or in Beehive. But if you want to be more adventurous, then you should do it manually and see what all the bits and pieces are made of.
Yeah, but I definitely say start with something simple like EasyJail and so on, and you can dig into the details after you understand the basics first.
It gets complicated easier, or relatively easy, but if you have a slow intro to the whole topic, then you are more likely to stick with it rather than giving up on the first few steps that you're taking.
Yep.
Okay, I think that's it for this week. So thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, comments about the show, then send us feedback at bsdnow.tv.